To get started. Thank you for your patience while we let a few more people log in. And thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you're staying warm wherever you are calling in from. We're very excited to have you with us tonight and excited for this discussion. My name is Abby Morgan. I'm a transportation engineer with Kittleson and Associates, and I'm the project manager for the study that we'll be talking to you about tonight. I want to start by giving you a quick overview of our project before we introduce our panel members. So Denise, if I could advance, perfect, thank you. Well, our project is called Connecting North Texas Communities with Emerging Transportation Technologies. It's a long title and we're working on a lot of different topics. We are creating guidance for your local decision makers on how to bring technologies like automated vehicles to our communities, and also how to make sure that these new technologies improve safety, reduce congestion, and create new opportunities to connect our communities. During our discussion tonight, you might hear us refer to automated vehicles as AVs. Our work is actually the first phase of a three-phase automated vehicle or AV program that is sponsored by the North Central Texas Council of Governments. That's your regional transportation planning agency in the North Texas region. Our project is the planning phase of the AV program. There are two other phases focusing on partnerships with local agencies and industry, and on supporting investments into automated vehicle technology. Next slide, please. We started our project last August. First, we focused on learning about the future transportation needs in the area. We used an online survey that many of you hopefully responded to. We also conducted several focus groups in the communities, and we held another virtual public meeting like this one. Through that outreach, you helped us imagine future transportation automation scenarios that local agencies will need to plan for. We're actually working right now to model some of those future technology scenarios to learn how they might change congestion or travel behaviors in the future. And right now, we're also busy creating a guidebook for municipalities on the best practices for hosting automated vehicles and other emerging technology deployments. Next, we'll be writing a final report before we wrap up our project in June. Now, I'd like to introduce you to another transportation engineer, Dr. Denise Smith of Hummingbird Firm, who is going to moderate our panel tonight and help us increase awareness of our automated vehicle project, explore challenges and opportunities associated with educating the future workforce, and share educational resources related to automated vehicles. So Denise, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Abby. As Abby mentioned, my name is Denise Smith. I am the Director of Community Engagement at Hummingbird Firm. I'm also an educator with a background in transportation planning and engineering. So if it's any conversation that I want to be moderating this evening or any evening, it's this one, which sits at the intersection of transportation and education. And don't worry if you are not a transportation person, if you're not focused on transportation, but maybe on STEM education more broadly or employment, this conversation is definitely for you as well. So to provide a glimpse into the structure for this evening, we're going to start with the panel, with panel introductions. So we're going to be discussing the challenges and needs, as well as the opportunities related to emerging transportation technologies, but through the lens of education and workforce development. After we talk about these opportunities, we're going to be sharing resources for the audience to leave with. And while we encourage you all to use the Q&A and chat boxes throughout the meeting, and you'll find those at the bottom of, most likely at the bottom of your screen, we will reserve time towards the end of the meeting to answer questions and read comments from the audience. Whatever questions and comments that we don't get to during this meeting, we will respond to those in writing. So we also will offer audience members who would like to come on this side of the webinar to ask your own questions. So if you are interested in voicing your own questions, you can simply put your question in the chat and indicate that you would like to verbally ask your answer. So before I introduce the panel, and I'll also mention that we'll be using Mentimeter throughout this meeting. So before I introduce the panel, I want to get an idea of who is joining us. If you have not used Mentimeter before, it is an interactive online tool that allows us to get feedback and input from you, and then we can share the collective responses. So on the screen, you see menti.com. So one way you can get to Mentimeter is to type in menti.com and enter the code 70, no spaces, 7018474. You can also click on the link that was just added to the chat, or you can use the QR code. I will leave this up for a few more seconds. Again, if you're new to Mentimeter, you can click on the chat. I'm sorry, on the link that was put on the chat by Marissa, or you can go to a new tab on your computer or on your cell phone and type in menti.com and type in that code, or use the QR code that you see on the screen. All right. All right, so the first question, and I see a lot of people responding already. So what role do you play in this discussion? I think actually there's a question before, I may have advanced it. So I'm going backwards a little bit. Where are you joining us from? So this is a question that we're not looking for specific answers, but it could be your state, your city, the region. Just trying to get a sense for where people are. So we have a lot of Dallas, a lot of Fort Worth, North Texas in general, East Texas, Allen, Texas, Plano, Allen, DeSoto. Okay. Arlington, Midlothian, Michigan State University. All right. Nice, diverse, geographically diverse crowd. Very good. West Lafayette, Terrell. Okay, Flower Mound. Yep, and that's a good, I also want to note that if you do not want to use Mentimeter, that's completely fine. You can type your answer into the chat. Okay. And the next question, I see that a lot of people already started weighing in, but what role do you play in this discussion? But another way of thinking of that is what interests you in this topic, right? So we have transportation planners, educators. I see DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, reporter, growth, all right, researcher on AV at airports, innovation, consulting firm, resources for youth. Wow, this is a nice mix of people in the audience. Workforce education, AV enthusiasts. Again, AV is automated vehicle. We have city council, labor market futurists. Okay. Partnerships, administrator, transportation, reporter, transportation commissioner, thank you. Travel demand modeling. And I'll just let this sit for a couple more seconds before we return to the slide so I can introduce the panel. And the purpose of these two questions, at least from my perspective, is to let the panelists know who we have joining us tonight so they know who they're talking to. And that allows them to tailor their discussion and maybe drop some nuggets that can help support your work, the work that you all do. All right. Very good. So the next slide you'll see, just letting you know to return to Zoom. All right, so here we go. We're going to meet the panel now. So we have Ernest Huffman. He is the Aviation Planning and Education Program Manager at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, or NCTCOG. We have Lakeisha Raynar, Director of Workforce Development and Apprenticeships Relationship Management at Dallas College. She's at the Cedar Valley campus. Dr. Kentrell Phillips, Chief Academic Officer at Everman ISD, and Dr. Janelle Smith-Collin, who's an assistant professor at Southern Methodist University. She's also part of the project team that is working on AV 2.1. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, turn it over to the panelists, and they're going to be able to tell you a little more about themselves and what their perspectives are in the context of this conversation. Right.
Dr. Smith, I'll go ahead and lead on.
Sounds good.
So I'm Ernest Huffman. Like she mentioned, I'm a program manager here at North Central Texas Council of Governments, and I manage the aviation planning and education program areas. So I spent 20 plus years in the aviation industry, primarily as an aviation or airport planner or aviation economist. And now my purview within North Central Texas Council of Governments is I manage 5 distinct programs. I'll talk about a few of them here. One is our aviation or airport system plan, where we map out the airport network. We got 40 plus airports in the Metroplex that are publicly owned, and we make sure that that network has every planning need met. Then I also manage an aviation education, a career initiative where we do career outreach to get kids interested in aviation related careers, to build the aviation career workforce for North Texas and the world. And also, for the context of this particular discussion, is I manage the North Texas UAS Safety and Integration Initiative, which encompasses advanced air mobility integration in North Texas. Advanced air mobility are the electric vehicles that are projected to be utilized Jetson style in metropolitan areas to move people around, as well as freight in the metropolitan corridor. And we're working in North Texas to integrate that technology from an emerging technologies perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. Lakeisha?
Hello, everybody. I am Lakeisha Rayner. As stated before, I am the Director of Workforce Development and Apprenticeships Relationship Management, a long title because I get to do quite a bit. My role at Dallas College is to actually speak to those internally and externally and look at how I can build relationships with our employer partners so that we can actually get them the workforce development they need. I was approached at a while back by one of the people who will be on later, Tom Bamonte. They approached us about doing an autonomous vehicle grant. And so I'm so happy that as far as I am participating tonight, it's on the standpoint of what we're going to do as far as the deployment and the workforce development for that particular grant. So I'm looking forward to hearing about what all the other panelists would do, but also how I can actually assist you with any questions you may have of me today. Thank you so much, Denise, for letting me be here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Kentrell?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kentrell Phillips. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with you. I've been an educator for 14 years. I've been a math teacher during that time, an assistant principal, a principal, chief of secondary education, and now serve Everman ISD as the chief academic officer. Everman ISD is a community where 95% of the students there are labeled as economically disadvantaged. And we know to change those circumstances of a community, we need to make sure they are prepared to take advantage of the employment opportunities that are present within their area, and making sure that they have all the skills necessary to be the best employees possible, be viable candidates. And so I'm looking forward to this discussion tonight so I can listen and learn from everyone, so I can advocate for the students in my district, and also so I can contribute in any way possible to making sure we have the resources available to train our students to be prepared for this emerging industries and all emerging industries. Thank you.
Last but not least, Janelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janelle Smith-Collin. I am an assistant professor in civil and environmental engineering at Southern Methodist University. I've been at SME for about 4 years, where I teach classes in transportation, including sustainable transportation and introduction to civil and environmental engineering. And I also conduct research. I lead a research group, Transportation Projects and Organizations Research Group is the name of that group. And I have a group of PhD students. And we conduct research that's broadly focused on transportation engineering and transition planning. But specifically, we are very interested in issues of equity and new mobility technologies, but also the intersection of social equity and resilient infrastructure. I'm also very committed to building the pipeline for the transportation industry and in engineering education. So I do work with local high schools, and I also mentor several undergraduate students as we think about future career opportunities for them. So I'm very excited to be here with these seasoned workforce development colleagues as we think about how to achieve that goal.
Okay, great, great. And that was a great segue into the first question that I want to ask. And Janelle, I'm going to stay with you in terms of answering this question. So this is a question. So I'm going to let me say the question first. So what would you say are the challenges and barriers of the technologies themselves? And another way to think about this question are what are the potential inequitable impacts that we need to look out for? And I'm asking this question because from our, if anyone was at our meeting this past August, a lot of the questions were focused on equity. And before we jump into the specific topic of what this means or what how the technology plays out in education and workforce development, I want to take a step back and just understand what are some of the equity concerns of the technologies themselves. And Janelle, I know because you work in this space, I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the question, Denise, and I'm sure many in the public do, right? The technologies themselves present some great opportunities. And I think all of us here believe in that potential for those opportunities, but are specifically interested in ensuring that all communities have the opportunity to benefit from the potential future of emerging transportation technologies. From an equity standpoint, one of the things that we are concerned about are any disparities that may be present as we move towards implementation, right? We want to make sure that there aren't unequal burdens within communities. And I think what's so great about this research project and this research team is that we've really tried to center that discussion and that thinking. And what does it mean to have those potential disparities? We want to ensure that as we bring these technologies on, we improve access. And we improve access for those who oftentimes have limited access to resources or to points of interest. And particularly from an education standpoint, that we're looking to diversify the workforce, right? We know currently that transportation has an aging workforce, but that workforce is also primarily male, right? So there are opportunities in terms of diversifying for women. But we also know that the portion of minoritized students is not as large as it needs to be. And there are great opportunities, I think, to grow the transportation workforce from that standpoint. And if we just think about communities, because of the project's goals and the project's focus, we want to ensure that there's equal availability of transportation emerging technologies. So all communities have availability, but also access, right? And those two things are different, and we want to think about those. We also want to think about the issue of cost and payability, right? So who can afford to use these emerging technologies, whether it be AV or connected or shared. And I know this topic is somewhat a little broader than AV, and so there are opportunities to think about shared mobility. And then the other thing that we want to think about particularly becomes important for emerging transportation technologies is just access in terms of who has Wi-Fi access to be able to participate, right? So these are all equity considerations that we want to start to think about. And then the last bit is who has the educational background to use this wonderful growing field as a way to create economic mobility, right? And so that's really, I think, the crux, maybe I would say, not speaking for the panelists, but really that's what it's about, right? It's about having the background that can ensure economic mobility. So as we think about the great opportunities, we also want to ensure that we don't perpetuate those challenges and barriers.
Okay, wow. So I heard a lot of things in there, and I think that I want to hear from everybody else as well. So I'm going to go on to the next question, but just to recognize the question that's already in the chat. Michelle Jackson says, I've read reports that algorithms for autonomous vehicles have difficulty recognizing pedestrians with darker skin tones. Is this true? Are they reworking the algorithms to correct this? I think in terms of the more technical questions, I don't know if we'll be getting into those as much tonight, but I definitely, I've seen research, I've seen reports that have definitely highlighted that as a concern. And I think that just goes to say that there are a plethora of equity concerns that that really can be addressed early on if we have those people in the education, in the workforce to bring those up and make sure that they're addressed. Ernest.
Yeah, so I'll hop in on the equity concern. So just for context, I'm speaking in regards to the emerging industries of small drone integration and advanced air mobility, as I mentioned earlier. And was a very timely conversation, this equity conversation in regards to an emerging industry like mine, when you consider the juxtaposition against the NFL. The primary equity concern within the NFL that's being discussed right now is ownership and minority ownership of teams. And one of the main barriers to entry to ownership of minorities when the NFL was established was along color lines. You couldn't be a Black individual and try to buy a team when the NFL was established. And that's been a continuous barrier throughout the existence of the NFL. Now, with the emerging industries like eVTOL industries, advanced air mobility, small drone industries, it's emerging. So all of these companies that are coming on board, they're all in startup mode. And what we've learned with folks, I mean, it's common sense. When you're starting up new companies, you tend to build your companies alongside the networks that you're familiar with. And typically, as tradition states, and as we've seen in previous industries, those companies have been started alongside those discriminatory, I won't even say discriminatory, but limited view networks. Great opportunity now within emerging industries to get in front of that now, allow ownership to minority interests, get minority folks the ability to buy equity stake in these particular industries, in these particular companies from the beginning. And what we've been seeing though, what's a big difference from when NFL was started and a lot of our traditional companies now is there are a lot of minority folks in the C-suites leading these companies that are making sure that they're checking the boxes and making sure the equity stuff is taken care of on the front end, and particularly in the industries that I'm concerned with. But big equity things, ownership, we got to make sure that minorities get the ownership that they're able to afford in these industries. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ernest. So the next question, I think it's really continuation of the question that I previously asked. What are the most pressing challenges and barriers in preparing the future workforce for the job market? Right, and that's a market that is very technology driven and a market that's needed to support emerging transportation technologies. And we've been using the term emerging transportation technologies, right? Automated vehicles is one, right? These are, some level of being able to control where the car can control some of the functions, or at the fully automated stage, all of the functions of driving. There are also connected cars, right, that they can communicate with each other as well as other smart devices and with infrastructure, smart infrastructure. And then Ernest, you mentioned advanced air mobility. So we're talking about drones, maybe air taxis, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, automated air taxis, automated air ambulances, etc.
Okay. All right. Just want to provide that context for those who are not really into the transportation space. So, yeah, going back to that question, what are the most pressing challenges and barriers in preparing the future workforce for the job market? So a very technology-driven job market. So that's the, science, the tech, the engineering and math fields, so STEM, but also those career fields that support the emerging transportation technologies that are not STEM specific.
I'll take that one on if that's okay. So we looked at it holistically when approaching how we would go about preparing our students for what we see as an emerging field. Holistically means that Dallas College as a whole front decided we were going to even change how we looked at our college as a whole. We were previously 7 independent colleges, and we came together as one because we wanted to make sure the student focus was in mind. And what we also saw is that we needed to make sure that workforce and advancement or workforce development was premier. Even so much so in the the division that I'm a part of, innovation and business strategy, was developed because we saw that there was going to be that emerging technology and that innovation that was coming about. So from one perspective, we stated that we needed to start looking at how we could actually develop an industry perspective when it comes to the curriculum that we were going to do. That meant that we were going through and we did compression planning to be able to hear from those particular companies that we would be partnering with. We wanted to hear from companies as far as the autonomous vehicles were concerned on the passenger side as well as on the freight. And then later on, actually getting involved with UAS and talking to those about what we would be doing for drone technology as well. Because the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the time, academia wants to control the narrative. And we wanted to make sure we took that out of our hands and put it in the hands of the industry and actually listen to them and catered that education towards what they're going to need. Well, the unfortunate thing is that in an emerging technology, you may not always know what you will need. So we need to make sure that it was ever evolving. We needed to make sure that they were on advisory panels and that we were in the room in those committee meetings that were coming up. We had the opportunity to be involved in things that hadn't even been thought about from the perspective of inspection and things of that nature. So how do we become a part of the associations that would also dictate what those emerging fields would be like? And then once we do that, how do we make sure that the student isn't going to be in a bind in paying for that? So we went and looked for grants that would be able to help those students. As mentioned before, diversity is a big deal. So we actually instituted a diversity and equity and inclusion department so that we can actually look at how we're looking for those students who may be predominantly Black institution as we're in or Hispanically serving institutions, so that we can actually look to help out those who may be brown or Black. So we wanted to make sure we were looking at it as a whole. And then finally, even where we decided we were going to implement this particular study. So as far as the workforce development and the deployment of this particular technology, we chose one that was in an area that has transportation issues. So we want to make sure that it's in a location where we're actually having those students who have barriers to not having as much opportunity for transportation or for education to be the ones to be advancing us in the future.
Thank you, Lakeisha. That's impressive to hear what Dallas College is doing, especially just the perspective, that holistic perspective to this topic. Anybody else want to add on to that question? And Lakeisha also dropped some nuggets in terms of the opportunities and the solutions, but does anyone else want to share more so on the challenges and barriers?
No, I would like to, and I agree with you, Denise. That was some great information because I see the challenges being, so Everman ISD is a fairly small school district. We're about 5,000 students or so. And the reason why I provide that information is that I think our challenges are exposure and access. You know, so being the size district that we are, we're on a fixed income, if you will. We're on a fixed budget. And so being exposed to what technologies and what industries are emerging, what's going to be in demand is very important. The reason it's important for us because it allows us to focus our resources to pursue education in that particular industry and training in that industry. Because in technology, as we all know, equipment is very expensive. So we can't have a broad approach to what we provide our students and what we provide access to. We have to be very intentional about what we go about providing access to and what we acquire for our students. And so there are times that maybe we're not exposed to, and Lakeisha made some great points and gave me some great ideas. And so I really appreciate that. We're maybe not exposed to what is coming now, what is emerging, and things of that nature. So we won't quite know what to pursue and what to focus in on. And because of that, it may limit our access to the appropriate equipment to make sure our students are trained in that area. So I would say those are the primary challenges that I see in my school district. Would be exposure to those emerging technologies, those emerging industries, because it's important that technology changes so fast, so quickly, It's important that we are exposed to those emerging industries and technologies sooner rather than later, so we can make adjustments within our school district to intentionally prepare students with curriculum and also with equipment. And because we're on a fixed budget, a fixed income, if you will, we have to be really intentional about what we're going to acquire to make sure we're being efficient with our funds, and that we can maximize the opportunity that we have with the resources that we have.
Wonderful, wonderful. I like that. I'm hearing some words that come up a lot. So access is one that I've heard by a number of people so far. You brought up a good point, Kentrell, about adjustments, needing to make adjustments. And I think that corresponds to Lakeisha's conversation about being able to, like, not necessarily knowing what is needed in AV. And so it's, this is a quick moving topic. And as the technology becomes a little more tangible, I think there are also more questions that we have, right? The more we learn, the more questions that we have about this technology. So I think, resources that way, just more clarity and support in that sense could help, and especially in the K through 12 space where we have the limited budgets. Ernest?
Yeah, so I think one of the major challenges with these emerging technologies, and this is a challenge. So when I took the job to run our aviation education career initiative, the major challenge was getting kids interested in aviation, just the regular aviation careers, because you got an aging out industry that's projected to age out to date, the next 10 years. You got air traffic controllers, they're all very old. The pilot community, the aerospace engineer community, they're very old. So when I took that job, the outreach events and the initiative was all focused on getting kids just interested in an aviation career, because that workforce is going to need those bodies to fill. Just add on that component of the emerging industry, those new jobs that what Ms. Rayner mentioned, we don't even know the skill sets that are needed, but there's still aviation careers we got to get these kids interested in. And the thing is, we live in America where we're competing with millions of different, I can say probably 1 million plus different careers that kids can get into, adults can get into, folks at any age can get into. That the competition is just fierce in terms of getting the IP and the hearts and minds interested in these emerging technologies. So it's a full court press, full marketing press to get kids and get folks acclimated to these new technologies and interested in these careers. But we're competing with YouTube and TikTokers and beauticians and lawyers, and we're competing with everybody. So it's tough sledding.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that competition is is pretty fierce. So the last question I have specifically on challenges, and I encourage the participants to put some questions in the chat as well, if you have any. But can we say that we are sufficiently preparing the future workforce for the jobs and careers that they will soon enter? So I think that goes back to your point, Ernest, about the interest. Like, how are we preparing them? Going back to Lakeisha's point, holistically, in terms of making sure that they're interested and equipped. Janelle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question, right? And Ernest brought up how quickly things are changing. I don't have a great answer. I think time will tell. But what I do think is that what we can do is put the structure in place. And Lakeisha talked about the great efforts that Dallas College is going at to put a structure in place. And I wholeheartedly agree, right? I think that we really have to take this at least a three-pronged approach that integrates academia, the private sector, and the technology companies, as well as government, right? So that we're working together to identify the skills that are needed, in turn with the curriculum and education that's needed, and then also the policy framework that might be needed as well, right? To support educators, to define workforce needs and expectations, and to set out guidelines for training the future workforce. I think in the hope that as long as we have that structure in place, we can be nimble enough, right, to respond to the changes in the emerging technology space, and to hopefully be able to say at the end of it all that we did sufficiently prepare and we were sufficiently able. But I would also echo Ernest's comment. One of my biggest challenges is inspiring students, right, to gain this field. The idea that we have TikTok competition, for lack of a better term, it's real, right? SMU is a resource-rich environment. We're a private university. Students come to us with STEM in focus, but they don't come to us with transportation in focus, right? So it's quite a bit of effort to say, hey, there are some really great opportunities over here in AV and connected vehicles and shared mobility. So sessions like this, I think, that discuss the opportunities and challenges so that educators at all levels can hear about them, and studies like the one that we're doing with NCTCOG and phases to come, hopefully bring awareness to the development that's happening in the region that's focused on these emerging transportation technologies.
All right, thank you, Janelle.
Denise, if I could jump in there, if you don't mind. Because I would say, are we sufficiently preparing students for the workforce? And I would say right now, to be very honest, no, we're probably not. To piggyback on what Janelle mentioned, I think, if we build, we're in the process. I think many schools or school districts are in the process of building the infrastructure to where we can better prepare. But it's almost like a split focus, if you will. It depends on how you look at it, because we are focused so much on making sure students have those basic skills, and it's a great deal of emphasis placed on that. And those things do apply to different industries and preparing for the workforce. But then, because things are changing so quickly and the type of industries are evolving, there are different skills we have to place emphasis on also too. And so while my background is in public education, I have to expand myself or figure out how we build departments and divisions to be able to help bring in information of what is required to be truly prepared, or panels like this, as was mentioned, to be able to discuss with professionals in those industries, what are you looking for in those employees of the future that we need to intentionally prepare them for, and then figure out how to balance the state accountability system when it comes to those basic knowledge and skills in those core areas, while still preparing them for the future workforce also too. So I think there are some things in place to incentivize building that infrastructure. So I think it is being built in many places, but my honest answer is that there's still much work to do in truly preparing students for the future workforce.
If I could then come in on the tail end of it all. The whole point of why I wanted to be in workforce and advancement in this particular division is because I saw there was a greater need for us to actually highlight what we are looking for in education as far as workforce is concerned. So to Control's point, are we at that point where we are now focused on workforce? Probably not holistically, probably not as a whole, but is that what we're driving towards? Yes. To Janelle's point, that's what we want to be. We want it to be that in the end, when students come to us, it's not just for an education that may lead to a career, but that is the career that they're being educated on. If we can start having that earn and learn models that we're doing, then they're coming in and they're already being equipped with what they need to know. To Ernest's point, in trying to get the students to even recognize those simple things such as aviation, that's where we can come into play and actually teach them about what is out there. The unfortunate thing is that for our students, they may come in with a set of priorities given to them by their parents, by things that they've learned in the past. What we want to make sure is that we're broadening the perspective, and that we're also giving this perspective to people outside of just the normal who would know about it. So how do we do those things? How are we going about and educating them on workforce, and how we're educating them on these emerging technologies? That's what I hope we get out of it. That's where I hope the improvement comes, is that as educators, we are promoting them to say, this is a career you may have never thought of and never even considered, but do you understand what the LMI would be on that? What is the labor market analysis when it comes to what you could actually do in a field such as this? So no, we are not there, but in panels such as these, we hope we're getting there.
Thank you. Thank you. I think everybody weighed in on that. That was very, very insightful. How do we reach them? So there are 2 questions in the chat before we move over to the topic of opportunities. And I think maybe this first question can shed some light on that. So are there industries that the panel would prioritize for retraining to give existing workers / those excluded from the workforce or formerly incarcerated opportunities for upward mobility? I'm going to ask Lakeisha to start on that because I know you like upskill and reskill. I like that. I like the term when we
Yeah, I was
previously
going to
talked.
say it. Okay, so one of the primary focuses of our work group is to do the upskill and reskill. We saw opportunities for those who may be underserved, underemployed, and need to have this as a background. That may be those people who are veterans that are coming out of the military and they are looking to repurpose what they've learned into what they can do in civilian life. That could be those who are previously incarcerated who will be coming out. So they will be redeployed into society, and they need to have access to things that they don't know about. And so then that also may be those who are in the different diversity backgrounds, different affinity groups that we may be looking at as well. So we said that we want to be able to do that. Some of the different things that we've stated before are grants that we've come in contact with. So the Texas Workforce Commission actually has a grant called Skills Development Fund. We found that that has been a very good tool to be able to do what I just talked about, upskilling, reskilling. And this is for those who may already be employed, or these may be things that we're looking at for pipelining. This helps our students to be able to learn more than just what they need to do for a degree. Kentrell talked about how sometimes we're just focused in on getting them prepared for what they need to know as far as education, but are we preparing them for what they need to know once they get into the career? So this upskilling and reskilling may just be the tools that they need, not necessarily to end in a degree, but just to be able to do it. One of the things we found was the essential skills, being able to talk to them and to help them to communicate better, whether that be verbally or through written communication, or if it's just in the process of being able to do conflict resolution. This is something that regardless of whether you're going into emerging technology or you're doing something that is just as basic as everyday life, as a supervisor or as a mentor or a leader, that you would need to know that. So we want to make sure that we're arming them with strong skills that will be able to use regardless of what industry that they are going into. So that way that these be transferable skills. If I was to get into talking about how do we go about motivating them, let's take, for instance, the mechanic field as it pertains to automated vehicles. Are we looking at that they're being deployed to actually know the basics and then can move on to know what it is to do the emerging topics? If we were to actually look at the FAA portion of piloting and whether that's something that they would then look at as far as how it could be transferred into the knowledge they would need to actually do drones. It's how do we get them to see that one thing can learn to another? And that's basically career pathways, and to be able to do that.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Anybody want to add on to that before we talk about opportunities? And of course, we've already been talking about opportunities, but shifting the questions specifically to that topic. All right, let's do it. And I see some questions in the chat, and I think that they may be a good addition to our discussion on opportunities. But the first question that I have is just broadly, what is your organization doing to prepare students for future career opportunities and the trends toward a more automated future? So Lakeisha's already weighed in on that, but you may have more to add. And I know you shared some specific initiatives. I would love to hear about those initiatives and pilot programs, but we're also considering research that's going on. Janelle, if you want to weigh in on that, project-based learning, career development, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think I can weigh in on many of those things, but at SMU within the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, I think on the teaching side, we're doing what we can to introduce students to the emerging transportation technologies area, right? I teach a class in sustainable transportation, and I have a whole module that's dedicated to automated electric, shared and connected, right? It's kind of a broad look at the topic, but many students, when they come into that classroom, have really never thought about emerging technologies within the transportation space. So I think that's meant to plant a seed and build awareness. And that's an undergraduate course. At SMU as a private research university, really our students get exposure through research, right? So the opportunity to work on a project such as this one, we have students at the undergraduate level as well as the graduate and PhD level that assist in these research projects. And it's really giving the students that exposure to the cutting edge research that assists in their preparation. And it's the way in which a research university gives students access to these topics. And we have great students, and they have continued to support us as we support this project and others. But also within the Lyell School of Engineering, we're very committed to the pipeline development piece. And through the Caruth Institute for Engineering Education, we offer summer camps, right? They offer engineering summer camps that have scholarship opportunities. So anyone who's interested should check it out. But we offer opportunities for K through 12, right? For students who are interested, have like an inclination that engineering might want to be something I want to do, or their parents have an inclination that engineering is something that they should do. And we have summer camps that expose students to a variety of topics within the engineering discipline, within the civil engineering discipline, which is my own. And every now and again, topics related to transportation creep in there. So we're really trying to focus on educating that current cohort of university students. But as I said, building the pipeline is really, really important, as I think all of us have expressed, and as Contrell knows very intimately.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. So you mentioned civil engineering. I know, and I want to say it's Saria Adibi. We previously, Lakeisha addressed her question, but when we talk about specific industries, right, we want to have those skills that are transferable, but specific industries, are there, do others have thoughts about specific career paths and industries that we would prioritize? And I think civil engineering is, includes a lot within itself, right? Okay. Go ahead, Contrell.
So one thing that we have done, again, and because the name of the game for us is focus, we have to figure out what's going to be our focus, and we have to make sure we use our resources to support that focus. So we get information from the labor market, we get data from the labor market in the DFW area, and we see what careers are in high demand and what type of salary those careers are earning. And so using that information, we select about 6 pathways for our students. And again, that's important because that helps us with the issue with exposure. So we start to promote those pathways to students as early as elementary, because if they don't know about it, they don't have an opportunity to form any interest in those industries. And then we begin to add in courses as early as junior high school, where those students take courses where they're exposed to those pathways that have been identified as high demand, high earning careers. And so we want to build that interest very, very early and expose them as much as possible. And then in high school, we have courses, of course, where they have hands-on learning and they're able to earn certifications. Now, the next part is really key, and it's what we really need help with in K-12. We need partnerships with industry. The reason why we need partnerships is because students are very interested in making money. They want to know how is this going to benefit them. And so some students have an interest in going to college and pursuing that route. Some students want to work immediately after high school. The reason why partnerships are so important is because, you know, we have industries who need workforce. We can help supply that workforce if we can partner with you, and we can build that pipeline to supply the workers that you need. And so our students, once they hear those opportunities are present, then they gain even more of an interest because they want that instant gratification. Many of them need that instant gratification because, again, I'm serving in a community that are looking for opportunities to change their families' lives and circumstances. So we're starting with that exposure at a very early age, and as early as elementary. I think the key opportunity that we're looking for are industry partners to help support those students with careers and jobs once they leave high school. And I think we have all those things in place, then that allows us to really motivate students to pursue different careers that they may not have considered before.
From Dallas College's perspective, as far as the opportunities are concerned, is coming from two different perspectives. So what are the opportunities that we can have where as relates to those things that are already out there? So we looked at how can we help students as it pertains to those who are already in K through 12. So the partnerships that we have with the different ISDs was a way that which we could say that was a great opportunity. So where, to Contrell's point, how is it that we can actually partner with them so that we can start to do that education? Then accessing what it would look like as far as dual credit. Maybe we can start partnering with them to see, is it something that we can actually start to teach them? We then looked at true pathway models to see what can we do as far as building a pathway so that they can actually have these types of careers. So we saw opportunities as far as apprenticeship programs and internships. And we actually started to have a partnership with Handshake so that we can actually have those particular companies that Control is looking for that might be interested so that we can already have them in those jobs. And then once they're in those jobs, how can we go about to get that upskilling and reskilling that they need to be able to go on to the next thing? On the flip side, though, we saw that there was opportunities, as I stated before, with grants. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are a part of the North Central Texas Council of Governments grant for this AV 2.1. So we saw the opportunity to be able to gather funds to be able to help with this initiative. But we said that we didn't want to stop there because we saw that it was something that we had an opportunity to develop even for first and foremost, if we had to be a sustainable model. We started doing that outside of the grant. The grant is not even to take place or to be funded until probably October or later. We said that we wanted to start doing those things now. So that's talking to our School of Manufacturing and Industrial Technology to find out what logistics and transportation industry jobs we need to be preparing them for. To be talking to our Economic Opportunity Department to find out what are the labor market analysis that we need to do in order to prepare them. And then also to talk to our engineering, technology, math, and science to find out, is there any opportunities for those people who need growth as far as those IT industry jobs that could come out of this, even if they decide they don't want to just go into AV.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned like the pathways. What are some, can you give an example of a pathway just to provide a little more understanding of that?
Yeah, so we started talking about what it would look like if we were to look at AV as a whole. So there were 4 things that we identified. Let's say, for instance, that we wanted them to go through something called Introductory to Autonomous Vehicles, and we needed them to also be able to learn what they need to do for automated vehicles as a whole. We then identified that there was a way in which they could go into the passenger side. So this may be something along the lines of a Class C driver's license that they would need. So how can we make sure that they are prepared for that? They may be wanting to do something that's along the lines of a Class C. So this might be your freight. We needed to make sure that they're prepared for this. It may be something that they would need along the lines of UAS. So does that mean that we need to start looking into anything they would need as far as piloting and drones and for that particular model? And then we also looked at what it would be as far as the inspections is concerned. So we said that, okay, do we need to partner with an association that actually can certify on that? Well, we said that the primary model was the introduction to autonomous vehicles, and it may also lead to any of those particular models. And then outside of that, because we saw that there was the operation side, it may be that they are not wanting to operate the vehicles or operate these things, but they may also want to go into, thank you, Denise. They may also want to go into something that's more along the lines of the operation side. So actually promoting the business of doing something like this. So preparing them in that way. And then on the maintenance side, are they prepared to do the maintenance on those things? But it all started with the introduction to AV.
Okay, wow, yeah, a lot of opportunities or a lot of fields and careers that come out of AV. And even Janelle mentioned that policy side. So really good to have that holistic viewpoint again from Lakeisha. Ernest?
Yeah, I got something to add in terms of programs that we have in tow to help with the workforce development on the aviation side. So we got a few different programs, and I'll start with the different categories. So for kids K through 12, we have our aviation education or career education initiative. I do personally maybe 30 to 40 outreach events in person, and that's just pre-COVID, obviously. And obviously doing virtual, that it just opens that up a lot more. Where I get in and I'll talk specific aviation careers, and we do every event, career fairs, job fairs, anything to get in front of any type of community. I speak in Rotary clubs, anybody. We talk about aviation related careers. So that's what we do for the kids. And we created a mobile game to get younger kids interested in aviation related careers. It's called Fly by DFW. Another thing we created is called the Speakers Bureau. That allows industry and folks from industry interested in getting in those same classrooms to sign up. And folks like Mr. Phillips can go on there, log in, see the employers, see what they do, and get them in the classroom, ask them to come speak. And we're building up that roster now. And that's what we're doing on the K through 12 side. Now, in terms of adults and building up their workforce capabilities, we're members of the DFW Aerospace Consortium. They work on aerospace manufacturing training in the Metroplex. And we work hand in hand with them to make sure industry, supply chain, all those folks are a part of that group, but also that they're paired with workforce development centers, all the various school districts in the Metroplex, because we got dozens of them, and that they're all talking the same language. So that's what we do on the aerospace manufacturing side, and that's inclusive of all the emerging technologies on the aviation side. Then the North Texas UAS Safety and Integration Initiative. As a part of that initiative, I created a task force that we're now 400 plus members, 200 plus organizations that are international. The primary goal of that was to create a center of gravity around the drone industry, and that's small drones in the advanced air mobility industry in North Texas. Give the folks an opportunity to build networks, and that's everybody. The stakeholders on that group are airports, city governments, law enforcement, lawyers, drone sellers, drone manufacturers, anybody you can think of in that space, NASA, FAA, international companies, etc. Overall goal, though, is build a workforce pipeline, because these are emerging industries. They're just starting out, and we're paired with different regions around the country. Now, folks are sharing talent all around the country now. Then those pipelines are being established for adults in the emerging sector of drone technology. Now, on the diversity side, a program I just started was there's going to be a huge need for equity on government contracts in regards to aviation planning, advanced air mobility planning, infrastructure planning around emerging technologies. Now, a big thing that a lot of prime contractors are going to say, they're going to come out and say, we can't find subcontractors that have the skill set to fulfill our DBE percentages on these contractors. Nobody has the skill set. So something I'm doing behind the scenes is getting DBE firms the requisite skill set to fulfill those advanced air mobility planning contracts, those emerging technology transportation planning contracts, so there won't be an excuse in the future. Because here in North Texas, we got a DBE percentage on our federal contracts of 30 plus percent. That's a lot of money. Just imagine you got a $1 million contract. That means 300,000 of that has to go to a minority-owned qualified firm. There's no one doing that work behind the scenes to get these DBE firms qualified to do the work, and we're starting to do that here in North Texas.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Ernest. That's impressive to hear the number of outreach events and activities that you're that NCTCOG has been doing. And hopefully that can pick back up.
Oh yeah, we're doing it virtual still though. So
Okay, good.
Mr.
good,
Phillips, I'm gonna connect to you because I want to definitely get into your classrooms and send a
Mhm.
big thing we need, big opportunity here is get these emerging technology companies to start adopting these schools, getting in these schools with this cool stuff,
Exactly.
this cool technology, showing up all the time in front of these kids. And that's something we're working on in our programs here in North Texas. So it's fun stuff.
Thank you, Ernest. All right, so I want to actually go to the chat. I've been seeing a lot of things coming into the chat as well as in the Q&A, but I want to talk about work from home, you know, opportunities as it pertains to working from home. So this Michelle Jackson mentioned with the workforce increasingly working from home, how does that affect the transportation workforce, which traditionally has gone into the field in order to work? It seems these young people entering the workforce prefer to work from home. And Abby even mentioned that lends to an increase in deliveries and a need for more delivery services. So anybody want to speak to the opportunities there, or what that means for the work, education and workforce?
I'll jump on it then. Drone deliveries obviously benefit immensely for folks staying at home. If we can get more folks staying at home and people, we want our McDonald's faster and faster. So drone deliveries, obviously. So during COVID, the drone industry is one of those industries that didn't take an impact because the use of drone services, hands-off services, folks being able to do things without touching it and being in your face, obviously increased. So the demand around drone technology, drone deliveries, folks staying at home definitely helps with that industry and increases opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, indeed. All right, so I just wanted to address that question.
I do have a comment, and I'm gonna kind of take my transportation hat off and not debate the drone delivery situation, good and bad. But what I will say is that I think it's about setting expectations for the workforce, right? Students, at least it's my students, many of them, just like us, are really eager to get back out in the field. So I'm sure there are some who want to work from home, but I think as long as we are clear about the expectations for this line of work, and we can get students excited, whether that means working from home or being in the field, as long as they are excited about emerging transportation technologies as a career path, they'll do whatever is expected, right? So I think it's on us as educators, those in government, those in the private sector and technology companies, to just set those expectations. There are some roles within this field that will be able to work from home, and there will be others within this field who may have to be out in the field. And I think that will be the case for all of us, right, as careers start to evolve. So I don't think it's as black and white as they just don't want to be out there. I think we just need to set those expectations and just show them the value that it might come with being in the field at some point, and the value that comes with maybe working from home at other points.
Great point.
So if we're looking at the fact that we're talking about automated vehicles, this is probably the one technology that lends itself from having a work from home perspective. If we look at it from the operation standpoint, most of that can be done behind a computer, and it does not necessarily need to take place outside. So we can see how it is that some of the things that they may want to do as far as work from home may lend itself to this type of career. It may not be promoting those things that would not give the opportunity. Like if we were looking at maintenance, unfortunately, I don't want someone to fix my car from behind a computer screen just at their home. So how do we go in and promote those things that they may be more interested in that do not have a result of them actually being outside of the workforce or outside doing the workforce?
Sure. Thank you. Ernest?
One last quick comment on the work from home piece. One thing, and you've seen this bear fruit, is working from home has really helped with the diversity piece. So companies are now allowed or now they can hire non-traditional employees because they don't have to come to the office. So if you're a mother, a new mother, and you don't have the time schedule to get into an office, now you can work because you can work from home. If you're disabled and you can't maneuver, you can't get transportation to and from an office, you can work from home now. And you can do real impactful work from home because of the new technologies that are accessible. So, and I've seen this a lot, folks getting jobs across country that they would never, folks who will never relocate for jobs, but they get jobs across country now because they can work from home. And I think that's really good from a diversity perspective because it gives companies excuses now to hire you.
That's a great point. I agree with that. Definitely opens the door for different possibilities. So I want to, I see a number of questions and comments in the chat as well as in the Q&A box. I want to address Scott's question. Are there state workforce programs that can feed these initiatives? And what are ways that we can get these jobs on the funding track for education? And the way I want to answer that question is, I guess, do somewhat of some crowdsourcing before we close out and go back to Mentimeter. And I'm going to share my screen and see what resources we have that other people can share. So we've been talking about opportunities. So I want to hear about that from you all. All right, I'll share my screen again so everyone can see the information to get on to Mentimeter. So all right, so here the question is share any, or the prompt, share any related resources with us. So do you have any resources in terms of job opportunities, workforce programs, any information that would be helpful for those educators or even employers, people in academia? And if we don't have any, we can go back as well, and we'll share some of ours and those that we collected from the registration, so Zoom registration. All right, so Skills Development Fund. I would love to hear more about that. Skills for Small Business. That's another one. See, Marissa just put the link to Mentimeter in the chat. So if anyone wants to join and add to that, that would be helpful. All right, so I'm going to keep that open so people can add to it. But right now, well, one more just came in. So Inland Port TMA provides transportation in inland port. All right, so www. Inland Port, is there a D in there? Inlandport.org? Maybe so. But I'll keep that resources and make sure that those who register get all the resources. Thank you, Laura. Get those resources. All right, so I'm going to go back to just share some of our, through AV2.1, some of the resources that we have created. So one is, let me do my screen again. One is a set of lesson plans. So I'm just going to share this short video and just provide a little bit of context about the set of lesson plans.
Captain, it's more urgent than we previously thought.
I've got a couple of minutes. Fill me in on everything you know.
Quite frankly, we are running out of time. These transportation technologies are headed towards our region, and we have very little time to get prepared.
Slow down. What are these technologies, and what does it mean to get prepared?
Well, there are automated and connected cars, automated shuttles and buses, automated truck platoons, delivery drones and robots, high-speed rail, the Hyperloop, air taxis, even smart transportation infrastructure.
And all of these technologies are coming to the region now?
Pretty much. Some have already made their way to North Texas. and many of the technologies have been piloted in the region. These technologies will transform our region. We must understand current transportation options and transportation-related technologies, such as delivery apps, what communities need to do to prepare, what tech jobs we need to prepare students for, and what the consequences will be if we let these technologies catch us off guard.
All right. I want the brightest and most brilliant minds on this project. Go out and recruit far and wide. I want research, innovation, and creativity. I want a team of young people who will lead this region into a future where these transportation technologies can help us meet our needs.
All right, so that is the overarching lesson plan. It's more of a multidisciplinary plan. It allows students to think through the lenses of transportation planners and engineers, policymakers, workforce development specialists, computer engineers, and automotive mechanics to really determine or think through what's needed as we move forward. There are also lesson plans that are specific to subjects, so English, so there's a lesson, that same message, different audience. Social studies, a review of transportation policy, specifically in the context of automated vehicles. Math, that combines a little bit of the science and math to do a little bit of math through physics. Science, which is the pavement markings and the science of retroreflectivity. So making sure that automated vehicles can operate just because we have the infrastructure and the lane markings to allow that. And first Lego League. So this is an increasingly popular way to get young children interested in STEM. So there is blind spot monitoring with AV2.1, which is an app that allows students to do more of the drag and drop coding to introduce them to building as well as computer coding. So some of the other resources that we have collected or gathered. So this is in Ernest's space, Know Before You Fly Your Drone workshops. Then someone else shared Advanced Transportation Center, and we'll try to make sure we have links when we share this with those of you who have registered. Kittleson Summer Internship Program and Full-Time Job Opportunities. Alliance Texas Mobility Innovation Zone, ELDT Training Program, and Texas DOT. So we'll be sharing these, but just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to pool our resources and see if others have information that they want to share. So with that, I'm going to just see if we can focus on for the last 10 minutes or so on addressing some of the questions that are still in the chat or those that have gone unanswered, and just opening the floor to discussion. And I know Janelle, Kentrell, Lakeisha, Ernest, you can also chime in if you have any thoughts.
I think I saw a question in the chat in which they're asking about specifically articulation agreements that we have for K through 12 with Dallas College and other universities. As a whole, Dallas College, of course, has the ability to be able to serve those who are in the K-12 population. So we have those agreements to do dual credit services. We're also trying to partner with in the younger ages, so not just those in the high school, but actually doing something as it relates to the new and emerging technologies in the CTE programs that are out there. So we're trying to do something with that. Even so much so, although I have not had the pleasure of working with Janelle, partnering with our higher education or post-secondary, those who are going to four-year institutions. So we have transfer credits that are available for someone that is looking to go from Dallas College to a four-year university. As it pertains to what we're doing right now in the workforce and advancement, we're looking to see how we can actually translate the things that they're doing in the continuing education units to be able to transfer into credit hours. So they can do that. And then, as I stated before, what we can do as far as the work and learn so that we can give credit for those who may already be out in the community, are already employed. How can we get them those credits as well? All of these things are in the pipeline and being worked upon. But just to answer the question, yes, that is something we have on our plate to do.
Great to know that.
address, there was one question about what are we doing to address or involve the older population in the planning process? And that's something I hadn't thought about, but when you think about it, when you really sit back and think about it, there's the one population that's really involved in this part of the planning is the older population. Particularly, that's the main part of the population who participates in the civic process. They come to the town hall meetings, they come to these public type meetings, and they weigh in with their opinion. You don't see majority of the other age groups that participate to that level. So I'd say that in terms of we really, me on the planning side, on the aviation planning side, the older population, those are the main ones who come in on a daily basis with their opinion. You don't hear from anybody else.
And to piggyback on that same notion, they're sitting on our advisory boards. We want those people who are retired from this type of industry. It might not be directly related, but it's in something that is can have some type of correlation. So we're looking for the aging community to be able to advise us on things that we may not be aware of that can still spark what we need to do going forward. In the same vein, we understand, as was stated in the question, that they may not be looking to retire. As it's stated, they are probably our biggest population right now, and how are we retooling them? So that's still the upskilling, reskilling, and retooling them to see what have they learned or what have they done in the past that can now be used towards future endeavors and future career goals. Or maybe it's just that they're wanting to get out of what they did before. It's been very interesting to me, those people who are saying, look, I've been a doctor, a lawyer, or what have you, and now I just want to sit back and do something as simple as drive a truck. So how are we actually listening to them and being able to get them prepared to be able to do something that might be brand new to them, even at an older age?
Okay, thank you. So I see a couple of comments that connect to some things that we mentioned earlier. One, maintenance is also needed for shifting from maintaining internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles, understanding how to maintain sensors. So in that vein, computer coding is an increasingly essential skill. Also see coding may be something that is easier to teach remotely to incarcerated populations or require lower capital costs than traditional hands-on mechanical maintenance. I definitely think there's some opportunities there.
I guess I have just a reflection on that comment, right? So clearly I'm a civil engineer and I teach in the civil engineering curriculum, but for those of us who come from a civil engineering background, coding was not always a part of our background, right? Our core set of skills. But even now we've had that shift in the curriculum, right? There are places now where people are getting dual degrees in computer and in civil engineering and computer science, right? Because the idea is that the computer science students don't really have the understanding of infrastructure that supports emerging technologies, or the understanding of those emerging technologies. So if we can get civil engineering students that have that coding background, then we can keep them in the field and push them into this new industry. We see more and more that even our civil engineering students, they need that skill, right? And if we want to continue to service these changes that are happening in transportation, then the civil engineering students need that background. So we see that happening across the board. And the other thing is that CS is the largest, fastest growing field at four-year universities now. So we are also thinking about how to attract those students to emerging technologies, right? Emerging transportation technologies. So we don't lose them to what might be considered a more traditional Silicon Valley type pursuit, right? We need to tell them that there are opportunities in autonomous and AV and connected and shared that are transportation related opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunity, but keeping the students and motivating the students is also a barrier that we're facing, but I think we're up to the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And Janelle, I might put you on the spot. I can help answer that question as well, but when I pursued a civil engineering degree, I didn't even know transportation engineering existed. And once I got into transportation engineering, it was like, there was just so many opportunities and paths that you could go down, but it was also interesting to me to see what areas transportation engineering touched, right? So from your perspective, or from, where do you see your students, maybe undergrad as well as grad, going with the transportation engineering degree?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going all over the place, right? There's a plethora of opportunity in what we considered more traditional transportation opportunities, right? But the emerging space is really hot, and within this region as well, right? As I'm sure Ernest knows, and I'm sure everyone else knows, right? So our students are having opportunities with local governments. They're having opportunities with private sector companies that do technology. They're having opportunities in traditional construction spaces, and in infrastructure related spaces. They have opportunities. Quite frankly, I went to a lunch yesterday. I had someone come up and say, I need a civil engineer now. I was like, well, it's March. Students graduate in May. There are opportunities within this region. But you're right, Denise, there's also this shift, right? You did work, right, in connected space, even before connected space was as hot as it is now. Students are fully aware of those opportunities now, and they're being actively recruited by these emerging technology companies in the region, and they're being actively recruited by companies outside of the region as well. I think it's an interesting space for civil engineers and for others. And I mean, I have a bias towards civil engineering, of course, but I think Lakeisha has done a great job of discussing the other pathways that are available to students outside of a four-year engineering degree type opportunity.
Certainly. All right, so does anyone have any closing remarks? Anything you want to add to the conversation? The conversation, I think, has been really robust and, to me, insightful. And we'll make sure that we share those resources with the people who've registered for this event. But I did want to provide an opportunity to just share how you can stay connected. So we have I will have our third public meeting later this year, or in May, I believe. You can also visit the project website, connectntxfutures.org, send an email to connectntx@nctcog.org, and then NCTCOG Trends on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I want to just thank everybody for participating, especially the panelists who have lent their expertise and shared their thoughts on what it looks like to prepare for emerging transportation technologies through the lenses of education and workforce development. And thanks to those who have added questions and thoughtful comments to the chat that help push the conversation along. I want to make sure that I provide an opportunity for Tom to close us out if he's on.
Denise, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah, I had some major technical difficulties. It always makes you humble when you talk about advanced technologies and you can't even log on to things. But I want to thank you for your moderation. I want to thank your panelists. I've been listening in. I'm humbled by your insights, dedication, and energy. I want to stress 4 things we're doing at COG and the public sector generally. We're making major investments in emerging technologies through demonstration projects, and we're focusing those projects on use cases in communities that are not being served fully by the private sector. We're investing, as you heard, in workforce development activities at the community college level. Ernest is doing great work at the primary and secondary high school level, and at the university level through funding support for the North Texas Center for Mobility Technologies. We're trying to connect emerging technology companies with faculty and students to help do some skill building and career building. we're doing outreach. Clint and I do outreach on a daily basis to the industry, encouraging them to locate here, hire here, move facilities here. And you'll see things like the city of Dallas recently put together an economic incentive package with Ford Motor Company that included commitments from Ford to help support these workforce development things. So that's something we're working on. And finally, we're partnering with the private sector. We have a rich base of private sector innovation here, ranging from the Mobility Innovation Zone at Alliance, Texas, north of Fort Worth. We've got two global engineering firms, Jacobs and AECOM, headquartered in this region, and a major support for innovation here. And a final thought then is we've connected virtually. We've had some discussion this evening about what that means. And we at COG are starting to think of connecting people virtually, as we've done tonight and we've done over the past 2 years, as actually an emerging mode of transportation. So when you put together your curriculum and you think about your students, think of Teams and Zoom as kind of where we were with the Wright brothers in 1903, an emerging way to connect people to their life activities. It's a new mode. So in addition to moving people and goods physically through space, we can start to think about virtual transportation through ever improving means of connecting people virtually as a form of transportation and an area of opportunity. So with that, Denise, I'll turn it back over to you. I want to thank everyone, our audience, our panelists, and you for putting this great session on. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. So as we close out, I just want to encourage everybody to let this conversation be a little bit of motivation to continue the conversation and make sure that we're moving in the direction of preparing our students as we move forward. And not just students, those who want to potentially shift to a new career path. So with that being said, everyone have a great evening and thank you for attending, and we will be in touch.